Michael Duke Show returns now. Join the conversation online on Facebook at AM 700 KBYR and on Twitter at KBYR AM 700.
The Michael Duke Show, AM 700 KBYR. Thanks for tuning in. KBYR News Time, 6:49 AM. On the phone with us is Paul Elam. He is from the website A Voice for Men, which is kind of humanist counter theory. That's the subtext of the subtitle of the website. Lots of great stuff. He became a psychologist, and he's got some really interesting stories even in his bio here, talking about this kind of whole idea of a masculine culture, or the masculine gender, I guess, in this culture becoming a target, and it's a pretty tough deal. And he joins us on the program now to talk about some of these issues that we're dealing with today. Good morning.
Good morning, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. We're seeing a lot of this today in culture. I mean, it's, some people call it the sissification of men as a whole. Some people just say, in some ways, a war on men, where everything becomes an issue of, kind of this hatred for men and boys. I mean, there's no such thing as a good man in some college settings and things like that. Everybody's a potential rapist. There's microaggressions going on at any time. You must be a misogynist if you speak out on certain issues that may even touch on women's issues. I mean, this is a pretty tough deal.
Yeah, and it gets even tougher. We had our first international conference on men's issues last year in St. Clair Shores, Michigan, just outside Detroit. We actually had to change venues because of death threats being called in to the hotel where we were originally scheduled to appear. There is a lot of resistance to even having this dialogue about what's happening with men in this culture, what's happening in our family courts, looking at the men's suicide rate, looking at the fact that domestic violence is not just something that men do to women, that the reverse actually does happen. But when you start speaking about that, you're cutting into funding on ideologues that have made their bread and butter off of the idea that men are the bad guys.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, you talk about when the field started to morph up. I mean, you have a bio here on your website, avoiceformen.com, and you're talking about it seemed like one day, all of a sudden, it seemed like the whole idea behind counseling people, because that's what you do, you counsel addictions and other things. And it ends up, of course, going into not just the idea of drugs or alcohol, but you talk about all aspects of their life, kind of a holistic approach, and all of a sudden you realize that you're talking about, men in a lot of these relationships, and they started to treat masculinity as a disease, not the addiction. And the cure for the disease was a hatred for men and boys.
Well, that and for men to be pushed into a more feminine model of what they should be. I mean,
right.
These ideologues are really great talking about gender equity and fairness between the sexes, and of course I'm all for that. But when you start saying that in order for men to be adequate or good, that they need to be like women, you get into what is an abuse of your powers in counseling people. And that's exactly what I saw happening in the field.
Well, one of the most chilling things I saw was you said, and I'm just going to quote it right from your website here. It says, or as one psychotherapist told me just before being paid to address a group of male clients, quote, I love to take men's macho BS and shove it down their throats, unquote. The look in her eye was nothing less than sadistic, and she was looking at me no differently than she looked at her quote-unquote clients.
And that was sort of a watershed moment for me. I mean, I had noticed a lot of the writing on the wall. I had seen a lot of new literature coming out of schools that was pointing to what's called toxic or hegemonic masculinity as the problem, rather than the problems that were actually affecting the people that we were seeing. And then clinicians started adopting that language, and before you know it, it really did become just a male bashing fest. We separated men and women in communities that we normally treated them together, and we started teaching women, oh, by the way, your problem isn't that you're drinking a fifth of liquor every other day. Your problem is that your man is making you do that.
We're talking with Paul Elam from A Voice for Men, avoiceformen.com. You know, Paul, of course, the biggest bastion of this kind of behavior and these kind of ideals are coming from, you know, places that are supposed to be, you know, bastions of free thought and free discussion and kind of the discovery, and that, of course, is the college campuses. And here we are today where if I was a man on campus today, I'd be afraid to leave my dorm room.
Absolutely. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with it. Right now, since April of 2011, we've been under the Dear Colleague Directive from the Obama administration that has instructed universities who receive federal funding to reduce the standard of proof on sexual assault allegation from clear and convincing evidence to preponderance of the evidence, and has actually taken away the right of those accused to have an attorney present or to question their accuser during these tribunals that they're calling them honor courts. But academic careers are being destroyed in young men on allegation alone without any sense of due process whatsoever.
And they start talking about things like microaggression and did they talk to me the right way? And I mean, you know, so now we've instilled a fear in men, young men especially, in trying to deal with a lot of this stuff. And in some cases, it's really kind of in a lot of ways destroying relationships before they ever really have a chance to form. And then, of course, you see the male who essentially just says, I don't care. I'm going to be the man that I think I should be. And all of a sudden, even feminists a lot of times are drawn to him because he's actually embodying what a man should be. I mean, you know, being masculine, being a protector, being a leader, doing these kind of things. And I think that there's some confusion on the ladies' parts, on the females' parts, because they're being taught by society, by the colleges, by all the professors, and by the psychologists that, you know, it's wrong to want those things or to like those things. Yet they find themselves attracted to men who are actually manly men, not wussies, and they get confused by that.
Well, you certainly cannot socially engineer people away from human nature, and that is the attempt. That, of course, women are attracted to strong men who have leadership qualities and strengths and the ability to protect and provide. That is what has furthered the human race for about 3 million years, as far as I know, and I don't think a bunch of academicians at universities across the West is going to change that, even though they appear to be trying.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. We're down to the last couple of minutes here, but Paul, I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about A Voice for Men. What do you do, and you know, how do we fix this today? How does what you do help folks out there and help parents, raise these things?
Well, the most important thing that we can do right now is raising consciousness. I hate to use that expression, but it is actually what is important. A lot of people don't realize what is happening in our universities with our young men with things like the Dear Colleague letter. They don't realize what's happening in our family courts, the corruption levels there, and the way children are being alienated from their fathers is a normal part of the divorce process. These are people that are having their lives destroyed in the name of protecting women and children, but what's actually going on is the opposite. Most women will find that their lifestyle drops significantly, often below the poverty line after divorce, when they've been promised by lawyers that they're going to do so well with getting child support and taking half the property. That's not the story that actually comes out at the end. So the first thing we got to do is just make people aware of the issues. And two, there has to be a number of people, and including some of our politicians, that will stand up and say something about this. But there's so much fear out there that it's difficult.
Paul Elam, A Voice for Men. You can find it at avoiceformen.com. Paul, thanks for coming on and joining us today. I appreciate you calling in.
Glad to be here. Thank you.